How are you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Where's the best place to post this? Because people type in questions. They might. I might. At least it was all traffic. Yeah, I could cost it out like Concord and stuff. Trying to hit 80.
80, sure. Yeah, oh, it's smart. Maybe I should take my own vehicle and went home from here.
That's what I did.
I go back there.
Oh, now you got to drive back. Oh yeah, you should have brought your own car. Those are actually really good. No, I just wanted to taste it. It kind of tastes like a Dorito.
Yeah.
You can't take your truck home. That would be best.
Yeah, I care. Not more.
Now I have a couple. Did I take a car? I said, yeah, mine. I'll be back here when I leave.
Right?
Otherwise, we could have rode together.
I didn't think about the traffic going down.
Yeah. And then had to add another day by vacation because it was $800.
Doing? Good.
Brogan? $397 if we left on Thursday. Third time. Or leave on Thursday, come back.
You work with.
But I'm like, I ain't working that night.
Oh, very okay. Where are you guys based on?
Our headquarters are Houston, so we have plans for like 7 locations in the US.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So you're coming from Houston?
I'm actually coming from Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, because I cover the West Coast.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's someone else based in Houston and someone else.
I really like Seattle.
It's a
Cool
really good
place. Yeah. Do you live in the city? Or?
Yeah. Like 2 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I have two friends who lived in, we're living in like Ballard.
Yep.
It's like
Walk on there?
It's a really nice spot.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of up and coming for different professionals and stuff.
Yeah, it's really expensive at my house right now.
Yeah.
But like after everyone else is looking too.
Well, and I.
Yeah, I heard Seattle and like Bellevue blowing up and stuff. It's kind of the new San Francisco there, the Bay Area. It's
Crazy.
So for January, they pay it.
Yeah, I was trying to fit everything on my contract, but it's like right outside.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense either. Because of the way when we did the update after the Alvarian. So I don't know.
We're a small tech company out of San Diego. That's where they're supposed to be in the area.
Last year. Like you only need to
I was already up here. I was like, well, that covers it. So I was going to call on WebEx.
Kind of worked out for me too because our plan was to get not now or like I just want to get out.
I don't know.
Okay.
2 a day. And they get to make a pool car.
Right. Yeah.
Conference. Go back. I was actually really impressed. Wednesday and Thursday, we get overtime.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fancy. I meet and greet on the left. And the one on no flag place. And I don't have to work my life by kind of age.
Arizona,
Yep.
Colorado is like Colorado was.
Like, all right, I'm changing it. I didn't say anything. He's like, nobody can pull your interview, Jason.
I have those too. It's kind of hard to. You have a distributor on the way, and they contract you. You want to go to our. You guys get some when I go out there because it's hard for me to.
That's all I have to do.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
I went last year to like set them up and train them and stuff, so that was awesome. They stayed like an extra week.
Yeah. Just anywhere up here.
Anywhere for the wife, love that.
Yeah, once you're there, I mean, if you're safe, you just
Right.
get over to Maui or,
Yep.
you know, Hawaii.
Right.
and visit.
Mhm.
I'm trying to do all of that, but
Did anybody by chance bring
Yeah, it's
a
tough.
copy of their abstract if they'd like to use an example today? If you didn't, that's fine, but if you do have one, does anyone want to use it?
You won't?
Okay. We have kind of, so we're gonna do a couple group exercises, so we've got kind of mock abstracts that we can use, but if somebody brought theirs and wanted to use it, we could. So this table will use Andy's. Hope you're being ready to make an example of. Anyone else? Like to make a copy? Okay. And we've got another 10 minutes, so just keep chatting amongst yourselves.
And anyway, we have this presentation.
I've never done one. Yeah, so I've done like a lot of these little shows and stuff. I've never done like this last one.
All around our.
You guys still in business? Why?
I said.
Right.
oh, I got it.
So I had already, I took pictures. And they're like, do you know anyone else who might be maybe not?
Right. So it has to be a big enough project, right? And one of the city county of Honolulu is like, you
All right, 3 tiles.
guys have distributors in all these territories that you manage, or do you do it?
Yeah. Yep. I don't care, but I'm not gonna start for it.
Why you came along? Like try to decide why.
I think I'm home. Don't you remember I called you for the plant this morning? Yeah. Yeah. And
You guys use it?
no, we're working with. Oh, okay.
Commute from my office right across the
And like,
Go an hour for us.
this morning, I have to.
This business is like, it's such a small, like, kind of. Yeah, I mean, exactly, I'm sure I've seen like everybody at the shows.
Yeah.
It's
It's crazy.
And then last night, not last night,
No,
last
they had, wait, they were with him a year ago and
night. They said it was so loud.
over anything else, but it's, you know, they're pretty much doing the same thing. the
Right.
same-
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's like when people like move jobs, they just stay there, like they stay in the same industry, like they just move to a different company or industry.
Oh, no.
Hi, welcome. How are you?
Stuff. So out of college, I was like a no brain trainer.
I just figured I
I'm a college kid, and they don't really have to train me, right? So
would.
like 20 boys.
Monica, I think we've met before.
You guys use the distributor network anywhere outside yeah, cross country we have distributors. I think we have like 6.7 or something. I don't know, too. A little bit. Yeah.
At like a third company
Okay,
that goes
okay, right,
I'm
right, okay.
Yeah,
So
so.
have a very nice PDF.
Pull for this table.
Yeah, definitely
Couple
like,
options we have there,
there's
so, yeah, one has, focus on the
Right.
Same line shortening, and we're in building
Yeah.
now. Like a dog.
Yeah, we,
I started getting compliments.
right, it's just,
Everything a little, run this, run that. And then we're like, we're gonna go back.
we're not very old.
True, we lost the compression. I said, it wouldn't happen to be on this line, would it? He goes, yeah. I said, thanks very much, appreciate it.
yeah, we're boards, like.
I was filling in for like, well,
It's called,
Right.
kind of like, no, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
A lot of moving parts, right?
Yeah.
So for you guys, would you, so we're gonna have these sample abstracts that we're gonna be working with. Would you rather do a collection system, like SSO response kind of thing? Or a case study on bioenergy and net zero energy at a wastewater treatment plant?
I just went from, he basically just,
I don't work in the collection system.
Perfect. And Greg loves that one because that's exactly what he's gonna be working on.
That's what I thought too, when he told me what he means. I said,
yeah,
that's what we
exactly.
got.
Of course.
You're like, this guy's gonna know, he'll do all the work, right?
Even nominating Greg as speaker for the table.
Really
Two against one.
when you're out, but. I'm like, this is probably helping me the most.
Somebody,
So we might have you guys join together, is that okay? If you guys
That's fine.
combine tables? Okay, let me ask you to group and then you can decide which table you want.
Everybody has.
Would you rather do, so no one's done the SSO, like the collection system response procedures. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but that one is not been selected yet. The other options are like a pilot study that's looking at side stream treatment, with a couple different pilot studies that were done, and like
Have it like
selected. The other one is like a case study looking at bioenergy or wastewater treatment plant and trying to go to net zero.
Pull up my email.
So with those three examples, do you have a preference? Collection systems, are you guys comfortable with collection?
That's fine.
Okay.
What exactly are we doing?
So what we're going to be doing is basically, so the whole presentation today is about learning how to be do learner-centric presentation. So the goal here is to take a look at like a standard sort of abstract that you'd see for CWEA and think about how would I develop learning objectives around that? And then what kind of exercises could we do with a group to try to, during CWEA, to do something like that. And then the idea would be that you could then take that back and use that as part of your presentation if you're a speaker, or if you're a facilitator to help other people to implement it for themselves. So it doesn't really matter what example you do, but it's good that we have variety. So I'm glad you guys picked SSO. I'll have a copy of it. So you probably want to sit at the same table just because you're going to have to be talking, but you don't have to, you got 5.
yeah, I think we're doing the whole kindergarten stage right now.
Why do you think I did it when you decided to? But today I'm very busy.
Yeah, yeah.
Monica, so in the room.
Oh, and then they have to do one around
But maybe it would be 8 or so tables.
Otherwise,
What understanding is that?
So the circle table, sometimes
It's like
6 to 8.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so 6 to 8. So most of the rooms are 72, 5, 8, 5,
And then there's this question, allow.
Yeah, like usually when I run into that, my presentation's like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Honestly.
so I just don't know.
So that's
Right.
cool, so we should probably get going. We lost Andy, we lost our recorder.
It's all that.
I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, wait, what?
Testing.
Right.
Testing.
Yeah. That's it.
All right, it's 12:15. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming today to West Coast Facilities in Davis, and thank you to all of you who are on the phone. So just so you're in the right spot, this is the speaker and facilitator training for the CWEA conference that's coming up here in April in Sacramento. So we're very excited about that. Catherine's going to tell you a little bit about where all the facilities are here. So if there's anything you need is throughout the course of the presentation, we'll get to that. But I'd like to thank you all for coming.
Wonderful. You can click it. Okay, so presenter attendee agreement. What this means is feel free to interrupt at any point, ask any questions. This isn't me up here talking and you guys listening. So the idea with the presenter attendee agreement is just to make sure that we all have an open dialogue and there is plenty of open communication going on amongst this whole group.
Good. So the other part of that, because this is a presentation, is that you have a totally free pass. If you don't want to answer, if you don't want to present, you don't have to. Feel free to use your phones and tweet out anything about the training if you'd like. We have our Wi-Fi up here on the board, our user Wi-Fi, that will get you access to that. So a little bit about ourselves.
I'll start out. So I'm Catherine Geese. I'm an engineering manager here at West Coast. My background in terms of technical expertise is in wastewater treatment, facility planning, permitting, recycled water, kind of a little bit of everything. With anything related to wastewater inside the fence and beyond where it goes, I guess that's kind of what I do. I've done a lot of presentations with CWEA at the conferences over the years. Diane and I got engaged with doing this learner-centric presentations last year. We did a similar version of this at the conference, and so we were Monica. I've been working with Monica this year as part of the EPT committee and helping get the program set up. So we thought it might be
Great.
Oh, thanks. We thought it might be great to do this presentation. The idea here is to take some of the ideas and concepts of learner-centric presentation and apply it specifically to the types of things we see at CWEA. We think that helps people better understand what we're trying to accomplish. So Diane?
Thanks, Catherine. I'm Diane Lee. I'm the marketing VP here at West Coast. I'm on the CWE board. I'm the WEF delegate director. I've been at West Coast for 11 years. I started in 2016 in December, and I turned right around that next spring and presented at my first CWEA conference in Sacramento in 2007. And I actually gave that presentation on Killed by Bullets, how not to give a lousy presentation. So that presentation really focused on the actual slides and the visuals and how not to just have a bunch of bullets that you just read to your audience. So I'm really excited to be taking the presentation game really to the next level and more than just being a good speaker, involving your audience in the learning process. So tell us a little bit about you. How many of you are facilitators? All right, we have 2 or 3 here in the room. And how many of you then are speakers at the conference? Fantastic. That's great. And how many of you have given training in other venues, either through CWEA or through your jobs? So you guys are used to this. You've given presentations before where you're trying to teach other people. Oops, one moment. We'll pause here for just a minute. We're having some technical difficulty with our online viewers. So what's the hardest part about being a speaker? Anybody want to share what makes them nervous about, or what keeps them up at night before they have to give a talk?
Speaking.
That is the hardest part, and we can teach you how to do less of that.
I'm always concerned about the questions that I'm going to get and whether you know what you're presenting, but if you get a question, can you answer that question?
Good that someone's going to stump you.
Trying to figure out how to make it engaging.
Right.
Good comment, because that is what we're here for today.
Planted him in the audience.
I did plant him. All right, we're good? Okay. There's something wrong with my candidate. Okay. Can you try? All right, very good. So, Charles, you do have something very valuable to offer to your audience as a speaker. Each of us has unique skills and abilities, and I commend you all for wanting to share that with others. So we have some things up here about public speaking, and I want you to take one of the Post-it notes. There's some at your desk, and you can pass them around. If there aren't, raise your hand, and I'll get them for you. And pick one of these 3 topics and write down on your Post-it note which one you are most interested in. So we have an interested question mark. So just take a second and jot down which one resonates with you. Which one are you most interested in? Okay, now turn to the person either on your right or your left and tell them what you selected and why. Take just a minute for that.
Yeah, right? Keep it going back.
All right, just real quick with the show of hands. Anybody pick something that wasn't up here at all? Lunch, getting out of here before 2. Okay, good. So who picked the first one? Being able to apply and coach others on the benefits of learner-focused presentations. Great. So we have one person. A lot of you, I think, picks this. How many of you picked the next one, the bringing value? All right. And is anyone interested in knowing the resources? Great. We have a couple of those too. So good. We'll be talking about all of these objectives today. Ways that you, especially as facilitators, can coach others on how to bring more adult learning and activity participation-based learning to your presentations, and the value of that, why that's an important concept in learning. And then Monica at the end will be talking to us about, as facilitators and speakers, what are the resources that are available to you as you get ready for the AC conference. I think we already covered the why. Does anybody want to share why they picked their topic on their learning objective?
I'm the construction coordinator for East Bay Mine. So we took communicating on multiple construction projects.
Oh, good. That's excellent.
Good.
Literally.
All right, so CWEA. Does anybody here have an idea about what CWEA's mission is, like kind of core mission about what this organization is all about? In just one word.
Educate. Educate.
Collaboration. Certification. Very good. You guys are good. So education, certification, information, and promotion. And so, you know, the AC conference, the annual conference every year, is one of the premier opportunities for CWEA to provide education to people out in the industry. And that certification piece is super important, as many of you probably know. It's important for those workers that are out there to stay certified, to be on top of these environmental issues. And so that's why learner-centric presentation is, focused presentations is so important to CWEA. It's not just about going in and getting your 20-minute credit and saying, hey, I was at this thing. It's about learning new information and be able to bring that back to your organization, share it with people, apply it in the field, because as we all know, our industry changes all the time and we have to stay on top of it. And so our goal is to try to have speakers throughout everyone engaged at CWEA in that core mission of education. It's not about promoting yourself as a consultant or your project. It's about educating the people in your audience. Learner-centric presentations. Basically, the idea here is that, you know, the audience, as I just said, is the focus here. It's not about you. It's not about your project. It's not about your promoting your company or whatever else. This is all about focusing on the learner and what are they getting out of the situation. And so who is the audience? Who is the presentation for? It's for the audience.
The learner.
Exactly. So for a minute, just you guys talk amongst your table again. Talk about some of the presentations you've seen in the past, whether it was at CWEA, whether it was at some other conference. What was a very memorable presentation you remember? And maybe talk about that amongst each other and why you think that was memorable.
Negative or positive?
Either one. Yeah, negative or positive. So think about that, talk amongst each other, and then I'm going to have a couple tables report back on what they remember.
I do. I was at a web tech.
California conference.
Yeah, it was web tech, and it was just one of those
One of the best.
presentations where it was a lot of bullet points,
Yes.
and it was just reading over bullet points,
Love
very
that.
monotone, stayed in one position. It was just, and yeah, I was,
And my favorite one, I know,
really struggling.
when they show you some data and say, I know you can't read this.
But,
Inspiration,
yeah, right.
different way. Not only like, you know, that's okay, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's like that was like
Jobs. She's put eloquently and engaged everybody in the audience. She asked questions. Talked to people as if we were talking to her one-on-one, and there were 1,200, 1,500 people.
The style.
Have you seen the innovation for projects?
Along the river. Really embrace the whole interactive learning. You've got everybody. So it's just the act.
Good example.
On the side of the road, different activities.
and kind of hard to understand the person, kind of mumbling. Well, the reason why I was in that presentation is I was problem. The reason why I was in that presentation is someone was presenting on our product after them, so I was just in there.
Wow, we had some really good discussion over here at this table. Is it okay if I share what you guys talked about? So we had both positive and a negative experience recently with the presentation, and what I heard was from the negative side, a technical expert, I would say, at a WEF, doing the 47 words on one slide, reading all the bullets to you. And then on the positive side, we got some really good feedback about people using technology in their presentations to show like video fly-throughs of projects. So that was very good. Any other things to share on negative or positive presentation experiences?
Want to share?
So I've got one, and this kind of speaks to CWEA in the sense of the last few years. I don't know when the switch was, but you've made a lot of emphasis on interaction, and man, it's paid off. You look at the economic downturn, and around 2008, attendance was really down for a few years due to financial constraints, but then once it came back, there's been a lot of effort, such as today, in getting this thing going. And I'm not just sucking up to CWEA, but
We did not plant him. Does anybody else want to share?
What he said is absolutely true.
It's the first time in East Bay Mud's history that they have too many people applying to come to the conference, that they now are, unless you're presenting, they're drawing names out of a hat, dividing people up into whether they're operations or maintenance or field services or whatever to allow them to come.
Wow, that is awesome. So that tells you, if you're a speaker, why this kind of stuff really does mean something.
I was about to share that the most memorable poor presentations have been twofold. Ones have been where the sales rep is providing a cookie cutter or very generic information about their product, and it sounds like a sales pitch the whole time through. And also some presenters that seem overly confident, and that you can tell, and even though they may have done this presentation many times, they didn't even practice, so it almost seems their voice is monotone, and it's almost uninteresting. So
Good.
Yeah, very good points. Anybody else have a quick comment? All right.
Fantastic feedback. So where do you start? If you want to turn the corner on your presentations, how do you get started?
Out of the box.
You out of the box. First, you get your running shorts on. Wear those to the conference. So the first thing you want to do is what we did today to really set the stage for your participants. That's a safe environment that we want you to participate, but you don't have to participate. That there are expectations about, we're all adults. If you need to get up and use the restroom, they're right down the halls. You can use your cell phones, but please turn them off. Those types of expectations are good places to start with your audience. You also want to be thinking about what you want, and I don't like the word remember here, what you want your audience to learn. What are the 3 things? What are the 3 main points that they're going to be able to take home with them? So being able to package that up will help you not only deliver your presentation, but it will help you format your content. So when you're thinking about what you want your audience to learn, you need to be thinking about the why for them. What's in it for them? Why should they care about learning this? And as you're doing all of that together and you're making your content around these learning objectives, which you're now confident that your audience has a stake in, that they have some interest in, then you can ask yourself as you're developing content, does this content necessary? So a lot of times people put too much into their presentations. You want to make sure your content is relating back to what's of interest to your audience and what you're trying to get them to learn and walk away from with this presentation. So what makes a good learning objective, Catherine?
Well, let me tell you, Diane. So, again, what are the 3 things you guys want to remember? So you might have remembered earlier in the presentation, we had the slide with the chalkboard and we asked you guys what you want to learn. Those are our learning objectives for today. So early in the presentation, you want to set up what those are and clearly so the audience understands what you're trying to get out of that. And so what makes a good one? First of all, know your target audience. Who are you speaking to? Do you think a lot of the people in the audience are going to be engineers? Are they going to be operators? Are they going to be laboratory people? Know who you're speaking to and try to tailor the learning objectives towards that group of people. Do people have a certain attitude about something? Maybe have preconceived notions about the way what you're speaking about. Exactly, maybe they're feeling a little grumpy that day, who knows? And these are some things too that you can kind of early on set on, like early on we asked you guys, who's a facilitator, who's a speaker? You could be like, how many people in the audience are, engineers versus operators? And maybe even on the fly, if you're flexible as a presenter, you can sort of tailor your presentation a little bit towards your audience. Think about the language. So, don't, again, like if you're speaking to a bunch of engineers, you want to, maybe they have a different type of language and different words that they use versus an operations group or a lab group. If you're talking to non-laboratory people, you don't want to use a bunch of super technical laboratory terms that only the lab people know. Or if you do, don't say MDL, say method detection limit, explain what that means, right? So make sure that folks understand what you're talking about. And then similarly think about their skill set. You don't want to be too, you don't want to dumb it down too much and make the audience feel like you're talking down to them, but at the same time, you don't want to be over their head. So in terms of learning objectives, the idea here is, you want an action to come out of the presentation. So you want them to be able to explain or describe what they've learned that day, or to discuss it or assess it for their own facility or analyze it. Maybe they want them to be able to do an analysis, like a specific type of calculation, or to make a determinant or differentiation. So for those here, we've got on the table here a list of potential action items, and in a minute we're going to do an exercise where we practice writing learning objectives. So you can use that table, and if you guys want a copy of that, we can pass it on. One thing to caution though, it is not, I want my audience to understand XYZ, or I don't want my audience to learn something, because those are, I mean, that's the whole point, right? They're not there to, it's to actually walk away, like what action are they going to be able to do when they're done? What are they going to be able to do tomorrow? So the difference between a goal and a learning objective. So the goal is the statement of the intended outcome. So that might be, I want them to learn this, or I want them to understand this. But the learning objective is, what are they going to be able to do again? So learning objective is a statement of one of several specific performance actions that they can make. And a single goal typically has multiple learning objectives. And so you want to think about, again, and you know, you might have, for your particular topic, you're an expert in that subject area. You might have 10 things that you think they could learn out of it. You got to be careful though. You want to limit it to 3, maybe 4 if you have the time, but too many, it's going to be too much information. So you need to really boil it down to the 3 most succinct pieces of things that you want them to learn and be able to walk away from. So here's an example of the difference between a goal and a learning objective. So the goal would be here to enable the students to make a reliable and accurate assessments of learning, right? So that's kind of a big picture. This is what I want them to do. So coming out of that, the learning objectives, they'd be to develop an appropriate multiple choice question, to state the accuracy of test scores and determine a test question contributes to the reliability of the exam. So as you can see, a lot of times when we're asked about learning objectives, we're thinking about it, we automatically go to the goal. And so now is try to switch your brain a little bit and think about, okay, what action do I want my audience members to be able to accomplish, not just today, but tomorrow when they're back at their agency, or they're back at their firm, or they're talking to their brother or whatever about what they did yesterday. Again, we'll do another table exercise. I've passed out abstracts to each table. You guys will have a little bit of time for this one. So those on the phone, just bear with us, and we'll get some feedback here in a minute. So I want you to take a look at the abstracts you have, the list of action items, and I'd like you to come up with 3 learning objectives for that abstract. And be creative, you can have fun with it. Don't feel, there's no right or wrong answer, but spend some time. We'll give you guys about 5 minutes to do this exercise.
And the words we're not using are understand, know, and learn. But we gave you a whole nother sheet with other words on it to use.
We're joining forces now. Objectives based off of this. We both have the response, right?
Yes, they definitely, they will come out of all these pictures here. For sure.
They get this newspaper. I know, I'm really. This is what we've done over the last 20 years. Gas, food processing. Yep. Okay, this is a landfill land app. Land app. I can't read it up. I was trying.
Spitballing, would one line objective basically be for the audience to understand what they're doing internally with their own organization? That's the service response.
Yeah, we have to come up with a learning goal and then the 3 objectives, right? If we want to get out this abstract.
Before they look at this, they have to understand what they're doing.
Well, you could say identify instead, identify internal processes.
Right. And identify with the events that,
Okay, So we normally identify what our loads have a power generation station. Yeah. Power generation station. So, people who want to do it to be able
The paragraph portion, like, we really talk about the technology aspects and the,
cost of operations.
like, return is exponential for these agencies that are actually adopting the technology.
Right.
That might be one of your messages. Please understand that cost of different projects.
And then, what each offers. Process.
It's not one of those.
Well, they do have the word recognize, so they recognize the value of this tablet system. Better efficiency.
It's a good point, because, you know, there's still pagers out there, so there's an adoption curve, if you will.
There's a gap.
Yes, there is.
Yes. You do it?
Think about the actual.
Coordination of construction projects on the wastewater treatment plant itself in East Bay Mud. Summer I had 20 at one time. I have 17 right now. 10 of those are just starting up, going to be going in April. So we're doing design and all that kind of stuff. And then the others have been going on, and they have been past their project phase.
And of course, there's the paperwork on the back end, which is.
And so we're continuing.
That's why I'm saying it's reducing your level of effort because you're not negotiating it. It doesn't have to be done by somebody in the field and then input by somebody in the office that's actually reviewing it. It goes directly from the field to review.
Cost. So cost is really important. And then the cost of putting this new project versus the new one, which is the solar project versus the old power generation.
So we're gonna think about the cost of each one.
Right, not just the project, but how we operate it, what's the equipment upkeep going to be.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Projects, not just.
It says they do it afterwards.
That's right. What we're going to be doing. And then what each project has to offer.
They have got new ones, but they're
It's something on each one.
okay, laptop.
That's for summer, yes, right?
I mean, they're great, brand new technology. They're actually, they just look like a brick. I have one.
We certainly would have been one of the
Temporary, but it looked like one of the James Bond cases.
Okay, we'll do one more minute. So wrap up your list.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, right. Broke down the sewer. Maybe not that.
I approve this message.
So,
That's a high level energy analysis. Identify factors. Estimating the value of digestion biogas.
So that's the engineering point of view. I just want to say, because we have an operations point of view, it's very similar. So ours is, what is the cost that we have to use PG&E? And what would happen if we were able to sell that back to them? How would that affect our cost of running our plant? The cost of the initial project, whether it's cogeneration or the solar panels, how much will it take to operate each one of those? Not only just the cost of the operation of the equipment, and the labor, and the training, and all the other things. Okay, what will that entail? And then what does each one of these processes have to offer right now? Whether it's fog, whether it's solar, whether it's gas.
You said the same thing, but in engineering.
Exactly. That is what it is.
I got it.
So you I think it's pretty cool.
I'm just the construction aspect. We making do all this stuff. I don't have an engineering background, you know, I didn't go to college.
I'm a fake engineer.
So they collaborate and then, all
I've got a lot of field experience. Except for the phone that says, I don't think this is what you want.
And it always
I mean,
works
yeah,
as one
you know, like-
district going and moving forward together.
Well, that's true, because, yeah, you're on in front of the. Fun stuff.
Planning, costs,
Yeah.
all that money stuff.
All right, guys.
That we call you a hat.
So it's okay if you don't have three, but we're gonna have to keep moving forward. But I am gonna ask each table to report back 2 or 3 of the learning objectives that your table came up with. And Diane, why don't you do the mic and I can.
Who wants to go first?
We're actually gonna have to charge others for ours.
Oh, understandable. So everyone on the phone, it's going to be a nickel each for table number 1 here.
Does that mean you want to go first, table number 1?
So maybe quickly, just for the sake of everyone in the room, you could kind of.
I've learned to do this.
Perfect. Could each table also just give a quick kind of synopsis of what your abstract is about, so that others in the room know what you're talking about, not just state the learning objectives. So it doesn't have to be a long detailed, but just kind of, hey, this was a case study about XYZ. No, a synopsis, or I can do it for you if you'd like. Okay, so the first table, you guys were the collection system SSO response. So this is a kind of one of the presentations you often see at CWEA, where they go and they talk about various SSO techniques and what different agencies are doing. And this was a mock of someone had gone and done a survey of a lot of different agencies and then reported back on that. And so again, this is something you see at almost every CWEA conference. And how do you make something like that a little more learner focused? So with that, we've got learning objectives. Go ahead.
So one of the learning objectives was to identify those internal procedures that they were talking about. The second one was recognizing the value of adopting what they were speaking of. And then the third was, how do you implement across several different agencies?
Okay. Bam, look at that. So if I could give you some feedback. One thing to think about maybe is maybe even being a little bit more specific. So I kind of came up with a few for mine. So for example, be able to go and explain to the benefits at your agency going and moving towards a tablet-based system. So having that skill to be able to do that. Make a determination whether your agency has basic SSO response procedures or not. You could describe how a tablet-based system can be incorporated into your program. So you'd be able to explain that to your boss maybe and convince them that was a great idea. Similarly, describing the benefits of having a risk-based program and what benefits that might provide. Potentially, this wasn't in the abstract, but potentially, what is the cost of doing something like this and how would that impact our operation? So I think you guys had the right idea, but I think focus a little bit more specifically on not just everything I'm talking about, but like maybe some specifics of like what they could walk away with as a skill. Who wants to go next? You're welcome.
So our abstract had to do with 2 pilots that were ran side by side, each of them using Animox bacteria, and the outcome was that one performed better than the other. However, one was also cheaper and required a larger footprint, and the results of the side by side comparison. So we decided that what we would think an operator or anybody attending this talk would want to know or come out with is describe the major treatment steps of the Animox process, describe the benefits of using Animox bacteria, and evaluate the steps for tailoring an Animox pilot plant for your specific needs.
Those are very good, very specific. I liked how you did that. Just for the benefit of others, I'll just name a couple other examples that I came up with again. So describe some of the issues that can occur during the startup of a Manitomox treatment process. Assess the benefits of side stream treatment for your facility. Determine key factors that are specific to your facility for side stream treatment. So maybe there's some site-specific things. Oh, good. See, this table, they had all these. Those in the phone, no. And then explain to your colleagues why an Animox side stream treatment process should be piloted at your facility. So very good. Who wants to go next? You go next. We'll do the table I don't have examples for last.
Ours is about a small wastewater treatment plant, 10 MGDs, and implementing on-site energy changes. They have a generation program now. It's gone to net zero. So I'm going to pass this to Mike and let him tell us the first thing they came up with.
Yeah. Pay attention to the differences here. There's a theme that you get 10 cents for this one. It's double points. So the first one is conduct a high-level energy analysis for your facility to identify opportunities for net zero energy.
What's the second one?
The second was be able to estimate the potential value of co-digestion biogas.
What's the third one?
What does each energy source have to offer the process and is it needed?
So we're looking at not only the cost of energy, but the changes that'll come into your plant, whether or not you will actually need those changes, solar, PGS, fog, food waste. There's a lot of ways to come in with energy, and how can you utilize each and every one of them to make the most of your energy?
Well, you guys kind of nailed it. Those were pretty much what I had here.
10 cents.
Yeah.
Something else I'd like to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's the thing is, so he comes from an engineering kind of background.
The first two folks he's pointing.
And Cheryl here comes from the operations side. And believe it or not, she wrote down things, they wrote down things. Then we discussed together. Pretty much it said the exact same thing, but I would love to hear you, Mike, tell your points that you came up with, and then you tell the points and watch how similar they are, but in completely different language.
I think that'd be interesting exercise.
All right, real quick here. So conduct a high-level energy analysis at your facility to identify opportunities to go to net zero energy. Estimate the potential value of co-digestion biogas, and lastly, assess issues associated with outside feedstocks.
Okay, so mine was the cost of the use of PG&E presently, and what can we do to sell back to that so that we have a bigger zero cost. The cost of the projects themselves, not only just the project, but how much is it going to cost to operate them? How much will it keep to have the equipment upkept on each one of them? And of course, what does the energy source offer us in the process? And do we really need that?
And that is very WGC. Like we have one that was a very kind of specific, like evaluating, and the other was very, how does this affect me, right? How does this? And one thing I will say about this is again, maybe thinking about that very little, even more specific, like maybe actually how to run a specific type of calculation. So calculate the additional biogas that can be generated from fog versus food waste. So not just kind of general, here's a graph, but hey, here's an equation you can use. And maybe you can have the table run that equation, things like that. Or calculate how much bringing in extra fog or food waste might impact your biosolids generation rates. How do you calculate that? So actually helping them understand some of those calculations so that they can then take that home and try it for themselves. And the final table here, Andy, since it's your abstract, we're going to let you give the overview of it.
Yeah, and then I'll recuse myself from the learning objective. So the abstract is essentially describing ways in which plants with oxidation ditches could go about retrofitting that part of their process to achieve simultaneous nitrification and denitrification, and then step through a couple of case studies and process control strategies and so on.
So it's a classic case study example.
Right.
Yep.
And I'll hand off to my colleagues here to talk about learning objectives.
Okay, so he had 3 already, but we kind of expanded upon those, so I'll try to avoid those 3. But one he had already was to ID potential applications for simultaneous nitrification, denitrification, expanding on that, or where it would not work. So the person would be able to identify, hey, is my treatment plant a good candidate for this or not? Another one was being able to discuss the principles of simultaneous nitrification and denitrification. And then also being able to describe, say, the additional instruments and controls that would be needed for simultaneous nitrification and denitrification. We had a couple others if you want me to keep going. But.
Why don't you go ahead, since I don't have any, why don't you give?
Oh, okay, yeah. So one was to identify potential pitfalls of converting, I guess, to simultaneous nitrification and denitrification. And then let's see, one of the ones that Andy already had was to evaluate and select instruments suitable for the application and desired control strategies.
Very good, yes. And I think I would say also the benefits of simultaneous nitrification, denitrification.
There were more than one case study too. You might want to consider how all of them were similar, the components that really went into every plant, and then also what were some things that made each plant a little bit unique. So kind of a compare and contrast.
Okay, we're going to try we're not sure this is going to work, but if there's anyone on the phone that has any questions about the learning objectives or any comments they'd like to make, we're going to raise your hand on the presentation and Monica will open the floor for questions or any additional comments. We'll give you guys a second to figure out what raising your hand means. Okay. All right, well, at any point, if anybody wants to raise their hand and may have a comment and interrupt us, please feel free to do that.
All right. Oops, going in the right direction here. So from presenter-centric presentations to the learner perspective. So switching the view from what they sometimes call the sage on the stage back to the audience and to the learner. So we're going to talk about how to get started with that and a little bit about how people or how audiences learn. And especially with the younger people, they have a lot more experience giving presentations than some of us did, than I did when I was growing up in school. They want a lot of interaction. They're very used to quick information, things changing, being involved with what they're learning. So there's definitely a lot more what's in it for me pressure on the speakers. It's not enough to just go and listen. And when you are just talking to your audience, when you're up front and you're giving the lecture, you have the lowest return on the investment. There are so many studies out there that when the audience decides the content and what the audience, when the speaker or the expert decides the content and what the audience needs to know. Again, the sage on the stage where the expert comes first, it's all about me, and the audience comes second. And you really have to put your audience first. So telling does not lead to learning. 20% of students can retain the information they learn in lectures. So 85% of them aren't even paying attention after the first 8 minutes of a lecture-only presentation. Study right here out of our own Berkeley University. And the lecture is the poorest method for promoting thinking, retention, 90% of the time. I mean, there are studies out now that show children in learning environments with the traditional stand and speak presentation styles are failing 1.5 times more often than students who are involved in a more engaged learning environment. People usually forget 90% of what you told them if they've learned it in a classroom style within 30 days. And the majority of them, it occurs within hours of class. And so with 85% of them aren't even paying attention. They've already got their phone out if you're just going to talk through your bullets to them. So learning is both a physical and chemical process that happens in your brain. And it's a change in the brain. It just cannot pour information into someone's brain. They have to be active with it. It's not about you. They have to grab what you're saying and they have to do something with it. So again, brains are not recording devices. So as a speaker, you have your voice, you have your slides, maybe you've got some props, but that's it. But you have got to put your presentation together in such a manner that you set up the conditions where they really can learn, and you can make that change happen in your audience's brains. So what does learning require at the brain stage? Well, first you have to see, hear, maybe feel the information. You get the information in. And the first thing it does is it enters into short-term memory. And that can be it sometimes. But if it's repeated and they've heard it again, or they've written it down is another way to repeat something. So maybe then and now it's entering more into a working memory. But it isn't until they start thinking about what they've written down or what they've heard and trying to put it in context of what they already know and relating it to their own experiences and knowledge, that is where learning occurs. You have to go through each of these 5 steps for something to really become solidified in your brain, that you have learned it and that you can recall it and put it to use in the future. So it's like construction, where you're giving them bits of information, but they have to take it, they have to make their own meaning of it, they have to apply it with their small groups or with the exercise into things that they know and experiences that they've had. They've got to be able to work with the information, to test it and to practice it and to apply it. And so evidence points to a singular conclusion. Who does the most learning in any presentation? Go ahead, shout it out. Who does the most learning?
Whoever participates.
Speaker does the most learning, because you have already had to look at the information, think about it, organize it, probably type it up and practice it and put it into story formats and have good examples. And so you're really learning. So this process is really asking all of you in a way to be little mini speakers. So when we come to you with a group exercise, we're asking you to take that information, work it over, put it in context with some things you already know, test it out with other people in your group, and then you're presenting it back. So you've become presenters in the process. All right. So, oh, I think, hold on. So where do you start? So the first thing is take your content. You have 3 learning objectives. So maybe chunk those into 10-minute segments. So if you've got a 45-minute presentation, you've got 10-minute segments of information that you're presenting, that leaves you 15 minutes or more for that kind of group conversation and that activity. So think about it in those terms. Layer your content with stories and facts. So don't just kind of present your slides, maybe tell a story or talk about it in a more open and communicative type ways. If you're talking about a pilot study, maybe you throw in a little anecdote about something funny that happened out there. Little things like that can help people remember what it is you're talking about. And then throughout that, identify about 3 to 6 places in your presentation that the audience can participate. So focus on learning design for 2 or 3 activities and ask provocative questions to spur thinking and communication. So, excuse me. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but these are kind of the 3 primary objectives here. And then, of course, take questions throughout the presentation, which we've done a little bit of that and we'll continue to do. So what have we done differently today? We polled the audience. We talked to you about whether you were a speaker or facilitator. That helped you put yourself kind of in context of why you're here. We primed your brain for learning with those learning objectives. You wrote one of them down. You started thinking about what we were going to be talking about before we even started talking about it. And that also gave us a chance for you to give us feedback too. If everyone said that they really were interested in the resources and the instructions for the conference, we could have sped this first part up a little bit more and spent more time on the end. So we've also asked you to do the small discussions, both just turn to the person on your left or to work with the people at your table in a group exercise. Some of the things that we didn't do that are also available to you, and these are described a little bit on some resources on the CWA website also, is the sticky note kind of thought collection. I went to a training with Jeff Hurt on this topic, and it was on leadership, and he said, take 5 little sticky notes and write 1 words that describe leaders, and then go over to the wall, everyone puts your sticky notes up, and kind of, group them together. And it became very obvious by the time we were done, there were 2 really complete separate groups. One was very long, talking about things like trust and communication, those really soft skills of being able to be organized, and then there was a much smaller list of they're a technical expert or they have some knowledge. And so it became very obvious early on that most people expect those soft skills out of their leaders more than they expect the technical expertise. Small group problem solving, a lot like what we talked about. Doing predictive results, having people take a quiz before you present the information. So you could have a question about these case studies. I have 3 plants. Which one do you think wasn't successful? Or something like that. And they can be predicting those results using stories and anecdotes, being accessible. I mean, we've been walking around a lot today. I think getting out with your audience is important. For me, it makes me a lot less nervous. Using props to be able to show and not tell, again, asking questions, and role-playing exercise, which Catherine will talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll talk about a workshop that I actually put together for CWA. It was a CWA WEF workshop where we were trying to get the audience to understand some of the complexities associated with on-site reuse systems. And for those of you in the audience that don't know or aren't familiar with this, these are the types of systems that are maybe done at a building level or a campus level where they're not really water reuse, they're not regulated under Title 22. And so agencies that are having, particularly San Francisco Public Utilities Commission has taken on the role of becoming the regulator. And they've developed some documents to help agencies understand how all the different hoops that you need to go through in order to basically do something like this at your own agency. So what we did is we used some of those documents and we went through the process, and we had tables just like we have in the room today. But what we did was we had different members of the table represent a different part of the process. So one person represented the agency, or 2 people represented the agency, 2 people represented the regulator, the county health department, who's very concerned, but they have no idea what they're doing. And then of course, 2 people that represented the building owner or the construction manager that was trying to implement this project. And we gave them talking points, and we said, hey, in your role, when you go through this exercise, this part of it, you're going to be very obstinate and scared, and the developer is going to be very excited and pushing it, and the city person's going to want to make it work because they want to see that move forward, but at the same time cautious. And so that allowed them to kind of have an open dialogue and experience what it might be like to go through that process, and really kind of retain some of that information in a way that I think much more so than just stepping through, here's the 10 steps that you go through, but here's this step, now pretend like you're going through it and see what that's like. So that can be a very effective, and a little bit later on, we'll do a little mini role-playing exercise for some of the folks in the room too. So back to your abstracts. So this is kind of this, we broke this into chunks. So our second chunk here was about how to do, different ways of engaging the audience. So now with your abstracts, you have your 3 learning objectives, your top 3. We'd like you to come up with, for each of those objectives, come up with an exercise that you think you could do in order to get that objective across. And if you want to tweak your objectives a little bit, since you've heard a little bit more, don't feel like you have to stick with it. And if you can't come up with 3, that's fine. And we'll do the same thing. So give you guys about 5 minutes to talk about that, and then we'll go around and share.
So this stuff is free insurance. It's got a lot of value.
First of all, since our audience is know what the background is, we were one of the using the tablet, just take a tablet and a piece of paper. If you got this, you put on information, and I want you to write it all out. And have the person they hand it to.
That was a race. Technical heavy,
Yeah.
Go right in.
Yeah.
CWA, it's a whole other animal.
I was writing it down. Here's your tablet.
Keep writing down. So that, what's the breakdown on the first one? Poll the audience?
Tanner, we're gonna have polls and
Hold on, you should ask, how many of you are supervisors? How many of you are operators? How many of you are managers?
through your phone, like they had.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Oh, yeah, that was fun.
That's hard to do.
We used to do.
Yeah, you just need a website.
What was it? It was like.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, there was a website, there was a website that she had already proposed the question.
It wasn't Survey Monkey, but it was something like, I'll remember the end of the session.
In the session, she said, go to this website right now.
Wow.
And then, yeah. Take out your phone, do the web, and then
Select
like,
when you want, and
everybody
then
was
it's
yeah, that's a great idea.
So, all right, so write that down because you're gonna say the first one.
That's such a cool.
Well, if you, if anyone has
5 years ago, where
Tea party.
at the conference, you had
to do both ways to see.
Are the paying so much for your wastewater?
ask questions. Ask questions. They'd have the questions being posted in real time on a board on the side. Wow. You would know the person's identity.
Called poll everywhere.
And then you're getting answers back in real time from at the end, like let's check the Twitter questions. Well, what ended up happening is you have like a few heavyweights at the conference that would end up just posing and fielding all the questions.
Give that sticky note situation, but you can do sticky notes. Who does this and do that very quick as well.
So in addition to these.
They had like a different screen.
There's 4 people that do this, 1 person that does
Like
it.
an interjector and like
Another
another screen in the room.
And then the other one was Twitter.
Same thing. I think the direct post is easier.
And have you already uploaded questions to the direct poll? How many exactly?
So like, if you leave it up to the facilitator to look through the abstracts, you kind of prep the audience. Challenge it beforehand. It's like trivia.
We're putting together abstract. It's my first one ever at this kind of conference. I've done them at Cal Pal, Building America, that kind of stuff, but never facilitator talking.
So we may have to modify the 3 speakers or 2 speakers in a session.
Yes.
So the facilitator's job and the track. The facilitator's job is to kind of link all of those together and like engage the audience with discussions. The facilitator will also be reaching out to you to help you maybe develop some content. Past facilitators, typically at conferences, the facilitator gets up and introduces you to staff. We're trying to make that person a little more interactive in the process.
Where they were most.
The audience link the different presentations together. So they'll be a
Kind of right down. And energy.
the audience.
Segue from one conference.
Or help you, because not everybody has necessarily participated in this amazing presentation, based on maybe.
We are all, there are 3 of us. We have already decided we're going to be giving a very short spiel each. The first time around, everybody at the end is my introduction and speaking of how many of you here are project managers? Being a project manager, then Tim comes up. And then when Tim goes through his, he says, I communicate with you, coordinate our person through my agenda, and then Bill comes up and he gives his little.
Oh, I think that's awesome.
Kind of the way you guys are bouncing.
Yeah, that's a really great approach to impact your friend.
So none of us, neither one of us out there.
Yeah, so the facilitator would ahead of time understand that that's what you were planning. And then they find out what the other speaker in the track was planning to do, and then try to make connections between those.
I don't understand.
So
That's what you call a track?
That's what you call a track.
Okay, track.
It's a much bigger push on the front end, less in the long run, the long term. Level of effort goes
And they're all under
how they,
they're all up together.
So that thing was like what I saw when I was looking at it, contractor here now wasn't.
So there'll be another presentation. So the facilitator will understand what both of us are doing and try to help you guys figure out what it means. And then they also, it sounds like you guys were on it, but maybe the others.
and I used to have a little somewhere on my desk.
So they might help with that too.
So we're trying to see kind of different things where I needed to go because one of these came up in this school that is which brings up and having you go around. So the person, the very first person we give it to.
You want to hold that?
Boys and girls, computers are the world.
You might hear, yeah.
What did they do? You well, this is the guy who is my nice. It's how it's not a real private amateur contractor.
I thought
Hold on, Joe.
I'm kind of like the center. I noticed I'm kind of like the center of this.
Everybody,
On the
right?
plant side, plant operation side.
Yeah.
I'll go with the construction coordinator. Everything. You know what you were talking about. On every project. And then we have the engineering side. So I'm also out there to turn out the engineers, not trying to be they'll be engineers. So they don't
That's our middle guy. We have our project manager that always gets calls now. We have a bill of our inspector. And to the contract. You know, you have time to do stuff. She'll come in and say, Shirley, want to do this? No.
Over to the office.
And then he goes, I'm right over. I go,
You guys have one more minute, why don't you talk amongst yourselves?
Okay. So we have the poll. Okay, wait a minute. Yep.
Trivia question, kind of like an educational challenge question.
How much?
Well, we're in a lead group.
Now, we don't know that anybody outside this table. And then
We don't really compare to like a light bulb, compared to a 40-watt light bulb. We're less than a 40-watt light bulb per day.
Now, I just talking about how possibly from the interceptors to the outfalls. Are you talking about stepping into one central? Are you talking about how we would plan? Are you talking about it's hard
Focus on the plant, but do you even think it's according to my son, 20% of it, even if it's. That's not a 40-watt light bulb.
All right. Looks like everyone is about ready. I'm not sure which table is the bigger group of overachievers here, but I'm going to start with this one. So this is our SSO group. Oh, excuse me. Okay, the overachievers want to go last.
Well.
Well, are you guys ready?
I'm in the way.
Okay. Remind me again, you guys were the side stream treatment pilot study. So here we go.
Okay, so we had a side stream using an Animox bacterial treatment, and we thought some audience participation, it can be a little boring. So we thought we would use a graphic organizer to engage the audience. It's called a KWL organizer. You can do it on a big sticky pad. And we just make 3 columns labeled K, W, and L. It means what I know, what I want to know, and what I learned. And at the beginning, what I know, you can just ask your audience, what they know. So you turn on the light bulb and ask them what they know about bacterial treatments and how they work, and what did you say? All the different kinds, the different processes. So as they're talking, they can either write it on the sticky pad, which would introduce movement and gives them some ownership. So they're activating that prior knowledge, turning on the light, and giving them a hook. And then when we go to the W, what they want to know, maybe, how it works, what are the testing, how has it been tested, what are those results? You might have to engage them by just asking some questions, writing those down, and then do your 10-minute segment. And at the end, what you learned, you might be surprised, have them write the bullets of the things that they learned. So that's a graphic organizer called a KWL that would encourage some audience interaction.
That's awesome. I love that.
Catherine, who's next?
Why don't we just go around the circle?
Okay.
So this is the oxidation ditch, simultaneous nitrification, denitrification application at a couple different treatment plants. So again, it's kind of a case study example.
I guess I'm the spokesperson. So one idea we had was to poll folks on what facilities that they thought, say their facilities that they thought simultaneous nitrification could work. And then later in the discussion, we realized I think you could poll people for maybe if they've already used it as well. So you get a representation of who's there and engage them thinking about whether it applies to their facility or not. We also talked about having a quiz. Can we do more than one? Yeah. Okay, quiz on fundamentals of nitrification, denitrification, maybe a true, false. And as you're working through the answers to the quiz, especially, really engages people in understanding the fundamentals. One thing also I had was to tell a story, like it's a case study, but it's kind of a case study within a case study, tell a story about, hey, we had this probe that was miscalibrated, and maybe you might see this too.
Those are good examples. Yeah, and I think the one I would say is just that, again, kind of back to that, making sure that you're not getting too far ahead of your audience. So if you're introducing a new concept like simultaneous nitrification, denitrification, you might start off and be like, raise your hand if you even know what this is, right? Because not necessarily everybody does. So before you even jump to where I could apply it, it's like, hey, do you even know what the difference is between this and a conventional nitrification, separate denitrification process? So next table. So this is our net zero energy example.
Yeah, so Catherine's comment she just made about polling your audience first is huge for CWEA. For those that go to a lot of conferences, I can tell you CWEA has the most diverse audience compared to a lot of other conferences. So understanding how it's almost as if you should have 2 to 3 different presentations in your head in terms of who the audience is before you even get up there and poll them. So we had a couple ones. First one speaks to what Charles has said about polling the audience. There's a website you can use, Direct Poll, that you can literally ask folks to pull out their phone beforehand and go to the website. And I think a lot of the onus is on the facilitator here to have questions started before the even session gets going and have it on the screen before you pull the slides up. And that way when people come into the room, they're interested, they get online and they hopefully don't get distracted and look at email and other things, but that could happen.
And I'll interject. There's also a website called Poll Everywhere.
Okay, that was the other one.
Yeah, and so these are, you can actually, people can answer the poll and then right on the live screen, you get the results of the poll. So it's kind of fun.
So the other one is kind of it's a quiz, kind of trivia type question. So we had the one that talked about net zero energy. So we started thinking of, what if you could poll the audience to see, is the energy required to treat wastewater less, the same, or greater than a 40-watt light bulb per person?
How much wastewater?
Per person. You had 1 light per person versus 1 person's wastewater.
What's the answer?
The light bulb is definitely a lot more energy.
Ah, good to know. Turn your lights off, people.
Which that could go against you. They'd say, why are we wasting all this effort on trying to reduce energy?
Good. And I think we've heard a lot about polls. I think I will throw in there, I think having your audience run through an exercise. So we talked about with this group that doing calculations. So having the group actually have, hand out a piece of paper that has a little mini exercise and give them the equations. And so then they can actually run it themselves. I think we have another example at this table of something they were thinking about.
Because ours is about communication on multiple construction projects.
Hold on. So this is an example of something they're thinking about doing for their own presentation.
So we thought there's 3 of us presenting. So we're going to divide the audience up into 3, and each one of us will take a question and we will whisper it to one person, and they will have to pass it to everyone in their group. They cannot repeat it. They can only say it once, and we'll see whoever the last person is, what they end up hearing. And we will have a copy of the question held up as they're speaking behind them so that people can see the difference. The one I attended said something like, I live on Cherry Street. I like cherry cola and something else. And then it became something like, Sundays, cherries aren't any something or other. It was very bizarre. And so once you run it through that, when we're talking about communication, the problem, people don't always hear what you're trying to give them, and the information gets lost on the number of people that you give it to.
Great. Fun. And now our final table is the SSO, the basically overview of different good best practices.
Sure. I will take it. We had a couple different ideas. The polling one, actually, I just wrote down while you guys were saying it, so I stole it, just FYI. Ours had to do with tablets. So a lot of these agencies do have tablets, a lot don't. A lot are scared of computers. So we'd probably poll the audience and talk about how many of you guys, your supervisors or leads have tablets out there in the field. That's an easy one. We talked about simply breaking these tables into groups and talking about what they do in terms of SSO procedures currently. And probably what they would see is that some are different and some are the exact same. So that would pop up. A demo was mentioned about the actual tablet, demoing the tablet. I think it'd be cool even to go a step further and have a couple of people in the audience play around with the reporting on the tablet and see how it works for themselves, because that's how you learn, right? Doing it yourself. Did I miss any? I have a couple there. Yeah, give out.
Everyone that participates get a free tablet.
Yeah, what I missed? Did I miss one?
That's how you become the best breakout, no matter what.
Yeah, we're gonna have a challenge to see how fast it is to write things down by hand versus having a tablet in place as well. Kind of a competition to show the efficiency of using a tablet for the reporting.
Nice, I like that. So I guess any questions? Charles, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know CWEA conference, usually there's an app. Is there any way the app could incorporate the polling?
Nice.
I don't know if the app can. Oh, Monica can speak to that.
Using
Thanks for the reminder. We are going to be using a new company for the conference app this year. And funny you asked that. I was just looking at some other apps of their clients, and they actually did have something you could put on the app that would link to Poll Everywhere, Direct Poll. Haven't investigated it. Maybe it's a possibility.
Good. And so I heard a lot of polling examples. I guess one thing I would say is, kind of how we did here, where you're having conversations amongst yourself. I feel like that's a very effective tool to kind of get you to stop a minute, think about it, and talk to each other about it. That is a way, just speaking about it, not just kind of responding to a question, but actually having a conversation with others at your table. It's a very effective way of getting people to think. So I give you guys, does anybody else have any other creative ideas that they thought of while we were going around they want to share? Or anyone online want to raise their hand and share any examples? I know last year, here's one other one. Last year, I don't know how effective this is as a learning, but I saw there was one guy that gave away 6 packs of beer for participation. So it encouraged people in the group to actually do the exercises and get engaged with it, and people got really excited because they wanted the beer. There was beer in it. It was like little 6 packs of beer. Yeah.
You mean just a limit of 1 6-pack?
I think there were 3 exercises, and so each exercise there was like beer handed out. I've also seen candy, things like so. It's like in little incentives just to get people to participate can be fun too.
Thank you. So we just recently attended a conference that had huge audience interaction throughout the whole 5 days. I just couldn't believe it. And we used a tool called Slido, and every time we went in, there were questions on the on the screen, and there was audience interaction. The audience could ask questions. The moderator could read those questions, you know, as they were presenting or at the end of the presentation. So there's lots of different tools, and I had never seen such participation in my life. And the best thing was at the end, once those conference materials were uploaded at the end of the conference, we could see all the questions, all the comments, all the replies, and the responses to the polls. So, you know, you could ask those questions: how many of you have ever heard of, or how much experience have you had? Should we do these things? Yes and no. All of those polls were included in the material uploads.
I love that idea. I don't know if we'll be able to be organized enough to do it this year, Monica, but definitely something to think about if we can't get it together this year for next year. Yep.
It sometimes happens when you just walk out of, you know, presentation and you think of a question. Is there any way to get like a follow-up right after? You know, if you could send in the quick question and then you'll get the answer later on, you know, maybe the day after, if that is a possibility through the app or through some other means, I think it would be beneficial.
That's a great suggestion. What do you think, Monica?
It's definitely something to look into. I know that our app has that capability, but I know the speakers have to turn on that they're okay to be emailed. So I just need to look into that.
One of the things I saw at the conference a couple years ago that I thought was a really clever idea was they had actually done a survey of agencies on topics. It might have been an SSO thing. And at the beginning of every major question, she had like the Family Feud thing, and she would tell the audience what was the #1 answer to, and then the questions that she asked these various agencies. So it was fun. People were just hollering things out, and very excited to see and engaged if they had guessed the #1 answer. Robert.
So we just decided, Shelley and I are going to use for our presentation, we're going to use freeconferencecall.com. We're going to have people sign up at the event. So if they want to have a follow-up conversation with us, then like a week later on a Friday, they can dial into this 1-800 number for free, and it can be recorded. And so our idea is that people that want to ask follow-up questions, because it's like you said, and it's not only sometimes just when you walk out of the room, but you also think about it while you're driving down the road, or you go into another workshop at the conference and think, oh, ideas start connecting. It's like, man, I wish I'd have known this an hour ago.
That's so encouraging to hear our speakers wanting to be that kind of resource for the people who are attending. It's fantastic.
So I had just a thought or a question, and maybe there's a precedent for this or not, but when folks come into, and I haven't been to the conference for the past couple of years, but when people start filtering into a room for a talk, is there an opportunity perhaps to, you know, once people get in there, try to break them up? So if you've got tables, say, okay, I want to make sure, to the extent that you get a broad mix of folks, that there's a consultant at every table, an operator at every table, an owner at every table.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. The way I would suggest is you would be like, raise your hand if you're an operator, raise your hand if you're an owner, and then you kind of look. I mean, you'll have 6 to 8 tables in the room. You might say, hey, I'd really like to break you guys up. It looked like there was a lot of operators here, a lot of engineers here. Can I get a couple of you to switch places? So you could do that. That way, it's probably the easiest way. That way they know, everyone knows, oh yeah, we're a whole table of operators and we're a whole table of engineers. So yeah, definitely.
You could also pre-mark your tables, right?
You could do that too.
With the little, you know, engineer, operator. So hopefully people would follow that cue.
People generally show up to your
sessions. It could be anywhere from probably 30 to 100 in that range. I think the average room size is 72. And we have Monica, part of the EPT, the group that's setting up the program, is kind of thinking about, oh, we think a lot of people are going to go to this, and maybe this won't be quite as popular, and trying to find the right room sizes and stuff. But I would plan on 40 to 50. Unless you're 8 a.m. on Friday morning, in which case you might have 5. Sorry for those people that have the 8 a.m. on Friday morning. I've had that slot many times, so I'm speaking from experience. Anyone else have any other creative ideas they came up with? Anyone online, Monica?
One of the things we used to do in my Killed by Bullets was I would actually give them bullet slides, and I would have them come up with a more visual concept to present the same information. And I did this as an all-day training for CWA in 2008, like the year after that conference. And the engineers, was great. They did it. They drew some pictures and talked about how they changed their graphics into something. And then I did the same thing. This is a know your audience story. I did the same thing for a group of accountants in an all-day long seminar. And we got to the part where I had the exercise and the blank papers and the crayons. I had people who would not even touch the crayons. They're like, no way are we drawing anything. I had to go over and they would tell me, okay, now draw the earth. And I would have to do the drawing for them. Isn't that funny? The accountants would not draw. Did not see that coming. But I also did an exercise, I think it was in Jeff Seitel's session last year, where they did the same thing, talking about now you're all part of different agencies and you need to solve the groundwater, sea water intrusion, recycled water on the coast. And then at the end, they had us draw a poster of our solution and present it. And that actually drawing that was very interesting and very engaging.
So for those of you on the phone, hi, this is Monica Myhill with CWEA. Thanks so much for joining us. I haven't seen any hands raised. This next segment I'll be doing, so hopefully I can keep watch if anybody raises their hand. Thank you. Okay. So I just wanted to show some of the pictures. We've got Arvin here on the left, who is the co-chair for the whole conference. And these are just resources. Zahir, I know you're on the phone. I'm sorry, I couldn't find a photo for you, and I forgot to ask you in advance. But then the next, that's me. And then many of you have probably communicated with Heidi already. She's awesome. So I just wanted to see a raise of hands. Who has logged on to the speaker platform? Awesome. So if you haven't done that or are like, what? Let me know afterwards and we can make sure you get all hooked up. So on this platform, everyone is asked to provide or update their contact information and their biography and upload a photo. If you're like, I don't want my photo on the website, no problem, let us know. We are using the conference graphic as a fill-in for your photo, but I would hope that you would all want to upload your photo. So I just want to clarify a couple of things because I know I had a comment from someone on the webinars like, when are you going to talk about the track facilitators? Well, the purpose of this training is for both the speakers and the track facilitators, and hopefully this segment will clarify that a little bit. So we're designating one person from every session as the primary session speaker, just because for technology's sake, we have to just have one person. So that person is asked to sign their speaker contract as well as all speakers. You also have a chance online to make any revisions to your marketing description or your learner outcomes. Maybe some of you that have gone through the training today are like, oh, I remember I use learn and understand in my learner outcomes, and maybe you'd want to make some edits to them. That's perfectly fine. If you want to make any changes to your industry practice area, we do have a function where people can search specifically for collection systems or safety or engineering and research. So a lot of that information was already collected in the call for proposals stage, but if you want to make edits, as soon as you make that edit and save it, it is immediately updated on the website. That's what's awesome about that platform. You can also add additional speakers or panelists if you know that you want to add somebody. But if you have trouble with that, you can always contact me or Heidi too, and we can help you on that. There is an option to ask for a special room setup or any special audio visual equipment that you might need. We do have some cost constraints. I know that I had a question, well, could you have 2 screens? And it's like, well, maybe if you have a good reason and it will really use the 2 screens, but that's just an optional step. So submit your session design plan, and we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail here in just a second, but it's building on what Catherine and Diane have already been covering in this training program today. We are asking that all track facilitators and primary session speakers get together before the conference, in person or through webinar, to just discuss what the speaker is planning for the session. The track facilitator may have some ideas for you. Some of them are very experienced in presenting themselves. They might go, hey, here's a great opportunity to throw in a poll or some other engagement activity. Their role also is to provide some continuity between the various sessions within the track. So a track is typically all the sessions in the room in the morning or the afternoon. In some cases, it may be all day. And they would be introducing the speakers. They would be trying to pull out comments from the audience or engage them or encourage them to ask questions. So last but not least, upload your session slides and handouts by April 13th. So because of the app we have in the website, all of your materials will be shown live to whoever accesses the app or the website. It is not limited to people that are just attending the conference, which is great. So you can really be sharing those. Now, I do have to stress that we are asking you sign your speaker contract to give us the rights to share that information. And any speaker can upload slides or handouts, not just the primary speaker. So what's the session design plan? So it's what 3 things do you want your participants to walk away from your session with, remember, or be able to do, building on what we've talked about earlier in this training program. Where will you put in some interactive exercises or activities? Now, we're not assuming that every speaker makes their session interactive through the whole thing. Some people are more comfortable with that than others. So even if some speakers just make sure they save time for questions and answers at the end, that's okay. And then we are asking you to tell us how you plan to achieve each of your learner outcomes. So if you say, what was one of the learner outcomes somebody came up with today? If somebody could
identify the steps in the process for.
Identify the steps in the process. So how might you achieve that? Where you're going to have to give them information about the steps, maybe have them be able to talk about it at their table. So it's just sort of the activities around what would you do to achieve that learner outcome? So the primary responsibility of a track facilitator is to facilitate the participant's learning experience and bring cohesiveness to that whole session or track. So the primary speaker and the track facilitators are asked to conduct a planning meeting or call. We're giving a suggestion of by April 6th. You can always go ahead and do it now. And then during that planning call, discuss what you submitted in your session design plan as a starting point for that discussion. So many of you may go, where are you getting these track facilitators? In some cases, the education program team for the conference identified them in advance. Greg, I think you're a track facilitator. Mike, I think you're a track facilitator. I'm sure we have others in the room as well as online. Catherine is?
Yeah, I am. And I have a question, Monica. I believe there's still openings for track facilitators. So I'm wondering if all those that participated today, if you're interested in taking on that additional role, maybe Monica, you can send out the link to everyone that came today, and you could sign up to also be a track facilitator.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll give you that cash later. But this just shows a screen of what the site looks like. Some of you may laugh. I use Sign Up Genius for my kids' school or my church or whatever. That is the case, but it works quite well. So it gets a little complicated to show you the live one just because me and the mouse aren't really agreeing together today. But as you scroll down, you'll see all the different tracks. You'll see who's already signed up. This is also the time where you could sign up to be the room host. A room host job is very easy. It's really just there to support the speaker and track facilitator and stamp contact hour forms at the end. So maybe you know of a session you're for sure going to attend. You're like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. Put your name down. So I will also send out Jeff Hurt with Velvet Chainsaw Consulting that I know Diane mentioned earlier in the session. He last year did a specific training for track facilitators on how to best work with the speakers. I will also provide you with that link in case that's something you might want to watch later.
And then we'll also have this. And then also this presentation, for those of you, even if you were online and you felt like it was a little long, especially with the breakouts, we're going to create a condensed version of this that cuts out the breakout session. So you can watch this again, hear all the feedback, and hopefully get as much value out of it if you felt, particularly, again, those are online, or anyone that couldn't participate today can do that. And then we've got Monica's contact information here. Oop, I just turned that off. Whoopsie. All right, so we've got a last little exercise for facilitator. So I know we've got a lot of speakers in the room, but maybe you guys will bear with us another 15 minutes, probably about 5 more minutes. So then we'll let you out a little early. So as Monica said, the goal here is, the facilitators are going to be contacting the speaker. So if you're a speaker, you should expect the facilitator to call you, go over the learning and objectives, and discuss opportunities for interaction. So we're going to have a little exercise here. Oh, I guess I don't have enough coins. If you have a coin in your pocket, pull one out. I've got a couple if you don't. It's going to be a one-on-one exercise, so pair up with the person next to you.
Greg.
Andy, I'll pair up with you.
Remember, like when everyone was collecting the states, quarters with all the states and stuff.
Anybody missing a coin? All right. So what I want you to do is flip your coin, and whoever flips the coin, if you get heads, you are the facilitator. The other person is the speaker, and we want the speaker. Are they going to be? What do you think?
Well, then you can flip it again if you're the speaker. And the speaker, when you flip it again, if you're heads, you're going to be really receptive to what your facilitator is saying. And if you're tails, you're like, I don't know if this audience participation stuff is for me.
And
so give your facilitator a chance to talk you into
it. And use in this case, use your presentation as an example. So if you're the speaker, say, hey, this is what I'm talking about. Give the facilitator a little overview of what it is, what you were thinking about doing. If you're very receptive, you'll be like, hey, I was thinking about doing these 3 things. And then the facilitator can maybe help you cultivate those ideas. If you're not receptive, maybe you're like, I was just going to do questions at the end and that was it. I'm not really into this. And then maybe the facilitator can engage you a little bit in a discussion. So we'll give you guys a few minutes to have that conversation.
I got my arms crossed.
Yeah, good.
I just want to get up there and read my slides and more.
My boss made me sign up.
No, I have my marketing person. I don't even know how to turn PowerPoint on.
Well, since I'm the facilitator,
Definitely cut mine down. Yeah, I don't have these sweaters. Yeah, that's, I think I'd be. Yeah, definitely now. 50 minutes. Yeah, right. Questions like no system. Yeah.
That is what it is. Yeah. Your communication is all. You have to listen to the project manager, what they need to get done, then you need to listen to the contractor, how they want to do it, and then you've got to complete properly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the last one would just be like late. Yeah. It sounds way better. Yeah, like when I went to Canada, I went to Ontario. It's a little weird restroom in some people say like, yeah, it's like, okay. It's like, yes, but that's a little. Where are you from? Okay. Never been there. Only been in Ontario.
All right. How'd that exercise go? How many of you were a little contentious and weren't so, did they convince you?
Yeah.
Good. Cookies, bribery.
Bribery. I like that one.
Bribery, good.
Oh, yeah.
Did anyone have a hard time describing the objectives and the purpose of learner-centric presentations? Any comments on how the discussions went?
So Mike Falk played a good obstinate presenter, and I was the facilitator. And we got to a place where we figured out a way to get there. He says, well, I don't want to do my slides. And I said, well, you can break it up, and you can, hey, take your presentation, just do it, but just break it up into 10-minute segments. If we could do like a little activity. As a facilitator, I can help you lead that, blah, blah, blah. One of the things that we talked about, though, was even if we did that, there may be presenters that have just like a zillion bullets on their slides, and to have them change those because it's more work for them, that would be a harder ask. So if it's just about them pausing in the middle of their presentation, not so bad, but if their content is horrible, trying to get them to change it because it's a lot more work.
Just a minute.
Yeah, Helen and I had an interaction where actually she was just trying to figure out what was I going to talk about, and it helped me to organize things. I haven't really prepared my presentation yet on how it's got to flow. And she was like, well, who is this tailored for? And that it helped me jog my memories as to who do I want to tailor for, who is it more focused. And she's like, well, maybe it sounds to me like if you focus on these guys more, it would flow better rather than being too generic. And that back and forth, or her trying to understand what I was going to do, and say, and who it was going to be for, really helped also organize things better.
Yeah, Helen, you should be a facilitator if you're not already.
Please sign up. Nice. Anyone else have any comments about that little exercise they want to share?
Yeah, just a comment. Regardless whether or not you are the facilitator or the speaker, I think that call, just having some sort of collaborative call with the speakers and the facilitator, is worth everyone's time. And just ask everyone on the call, even as you come in, the speaker and the facilitator is not organized, pipe up and say, hey, can everyone in a few bullet points tell us what the objective are, just to see where there's overlap? Because I don't know, my experience has been with these facilitators is we'll meet at the morning breakfast before WEFTech, and then you just chit chat, and it's like, what do we even get together for? What's the point of this? Whereas there's a lot of cool opportunities here to make a really strong session.
Absolutely. Thank
There are.
we really did not plant him, but he's doing a great job. One more comment.
So he's your cousin or?
Oh, just as a speaker, I was wondering, how do I find out who my facilitator is? If
We can see if the mouse is going to cooperate. Okay, so I will send out this link. It's the Sign Up Genius site. And Rowena, we would just go to your track. What day?
Thursday.
Thursday. We have a lot of openings still left if anybody here wants to take any of these on. Do you remember the name of your track?
In the afternoon.
It's in the afternoon.
Yeah.
What was the general topic?
Pipe for water, sewer.
Catherine might remember.
Yeah, visible sewer, how visible.
So we don't yet have a track facilitator. So here's an opportunity. If you know of someone that you think would do a great job, sign them up.
They're not here.
And this is a really good, also, if there's somebody at your organization that's been looking for an opportunity to get engaged with CWEA and maybe they didn't get a speaker slot, they wanted to be a speaker, this is a great way to get engaged with CWEA and start interacting in that process. So it's a great opportunity. And it's something a little unique this year that we've done. So I highly encourage you guys to do it. We're about out of time. Does anybody else have any questions here or online about the process? Any other about what the rooms are going to look like or anything else you'd like to know?
What are the rooms gonna look like? Can you pull it down to see if I have a track facilitator?
All right. Which
Thursday, 11:10.
Do you know the name of your track?
The name of the track is Contractors Are Here Now What?
So again.
a no facilitator. Lots of opportunities. I see this board and I think, oh, this is a board full of opportunities. And the rooms are going to look like they'll be pretty big rooms. So if you could imagine room enough for 8 large round tables that can seat 6 to 8 people. So this is in the convention center. So these are big rooms. Another thing, especially for interaction, if you end up with only 20 people in your room, try to get people to come to the front of the room. That type of thing would be a good idea. Another question?
Related to the actual slides, can you go over if there's a template or any restrictions for what can or can't be included on the slides?
Thank you for that question. We don't quite have the PowerPoint template ready yet. I'm hoping that will be available in the next week or two. We don't have a list of per se restrictions. We don't want tons of words on slides and 100 slides when you have a 50-minute session. So just be mindful of that. We try to be conscious that it doesn't sound like a sales pitch for some of you that may be on the vendor side or the consultant side. So just be mindful of those things.
I'll give you for the not too many slides. A lot of people say 1 minute per slide. I'm more 1.5 minutes per slide. And then if you think about if you've got a 40-minute session and you want to have 10 or 15 minutes of conversation, then that means you have 30 minutes of content. So maybe you only want 20 to 25 slides. So try to, it seems like a lot, but you'd be surprised.
We have a lot of pictures of 20 different.
Yeah, and sometimes if you have a lot of pictures, you're going to go through them fast. Maybe that's just a rule of thumb. But it's good to spend a little time on the slides and show less. Remember what we talked about with, make sure the content is focused on your learning objectives. And so sometimes you have slides in there that aren't really relevant. Maybe you get rid of those. Yeah. Any other questions?
You guys are a great audience.
Yeah, you guys were really great. Thank you so much
So
for coming.
we do have a couple questions from the webinar.
Great.
That I might just share. Whoops, let me find my glasses. Shannon Simmers asks, is there going to be more information sent out on the planning call we need to do by April? I can send out a little bit more. It's also a good idea to watch Jeff Hurt's webinar that he did last year, and I will send out that link. Oh, Sarah Burke says, wouldn't it be great if someone did a talk with no slides?
Ooh, challenge.
So
Karen?
I don't know if she is. She's a track facilitator for quite a few tracks.
There you go.
She's our lab committee chair. She's a superwoman. But any more questions here? I do just want to take a minute to thank our host, West Yost Associates, for hosting us. Thank you very much. And thanks so much to Catherine and Diane. They have been awesome to do this for us. And thanks so much for all of you for coming today and for everyone on our webinar. And we have been recording this. We are going to edit out the pauses that we took for the small group interactive exercises, and we'll be sending out that link. Give us until next week.
Thank you guys so much again. You're a great audience.
Electronically, we're going to put them in the PDF. You know how to upload on no. First, we want to put our PDF together with pictures and do all that stuff. So make it says, CWEA folder.
I'm coming to your talk, Cheryl. I'm coming to your talk.
Oh, thanks very much.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, one of those best friends that my wife and I have. Her name is Annette.
She's in California.
She's a nurse. She's a nurse.
Yeah, I'll be like the setup to the teardown, the whole thing. Yeah. Not yet. We'll do it with your guy.